Welcome to Analyzing Global Trends for Business and Society. This class is about assessing the magnitude of global trends and their effects on a number of things such as consumer markets, labor markets, financial markets, politics, geopolitics, natural resources, and more broadly, global relationships. I'm Mauro Guillén. I'm a professor at the Wharton School. I'm also the director of the Lauder Institute at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm originally from Spain, and I have one passion, which is analyzing global trends, trying to understand where the world is going. I have written 10 books and myriad articles on various aspects of globalization. Now, let me tell you a little bit more specifically what are the kinds of issues that we're going to be analyzing in this class. Number one is, I would like to persuade you that global trends don't affect everybody in the same way. That is to say, global trends have different effects depending on the part of the world, depending on the country, depending on the industry, and also depending on the company. I would like to use the metaphor of the tornado as opposed to the tsunami. Global trends are not tsunamis. They don't change everything in their wake. What they do, however, is they have very large, profound effects in some parts of the world, in some industries, for some companies, but not for everybody. So as I just said, they behave more like tornadoes rather than tsunamis. I'd also like to propose to you that global trends entail both challenges and opportunities. Some of them are negative. They bring about bad things. But others create opportunities. They create new fields of activity. We're going to be analyzing both kinds of trends in this class. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, global trends are important, and it's very, very important, of course, to understand how they are playing out and to what extent they will change the world. And you may think that, well, all we need is really to think about new programs or new products that need to be launched into the marketplace in order to take advantage of those global trends. I want to persuade you in this class that a lot of companies will also need to change their business model. They will need to change the way in which they do business, not just the kinds of products or services that they sell in the global marketplace. I would also like to persuade you in this class that maybe not just companies but also individuals need to change the way in which they make decisions as a result of some of these global trends. In other words, we were born and raised in a particular time, and as the world evolves, as we see the manifestations of these global trends play out, we will probably need to change the way in which we make decisions. And finally, I think I would also like to persuade you that perhaps we even need a new mindset. We need to rethink the assumptions that we were taught at school as to how the world works. Because some of these global trends that we're going to be analyzing in this class have changed, have transformed the landscape. Now, I would like to start by asking you some initial questions here that hopefully will generate discussion in the blogs that you're going to have to participate in for this class. So the first question is actually pretty simple. Do you believe that today there are more people in the world living in cities or in the countryside? That's the first question. The second is, do you believe there are more people in the world today suffering from hunger or more people in the world suffering from obesity? That's the second question. The third is, which of the following parts of the world do you believe are home to the largest consumer markets? Is it the US and Europe, or is it China and India? And then the last question. Do you believe that today there are more failed states in the world or there are more dictatorships in the world? Well, let me give you a sense as to the answers while you think about the questions. The first question was about people living in cities versus people living in the countryside. Well, since the year 2009, we have more people for the first time in human history living in cities than in the countryside. How about hunger versus obesity? Well, since about the year 2010, we have more people in the world suffering from obesity than from hunger, which is kind of striking when you think about it. The third question, How about the size of consumer markets in the world? Well, today, Europe and the United States continue to be the largest consumer markets in the world. But within just 20 years, China and India will be larger as consumer markets than the US and Europe combined. And the fourth question that I asked you was about failed states and dictatorships. That's actually a relatively easy one because it's been a long time, more than 30 years, since we've had more failed states like Somalia or Iraq in the world than countries ruled by dictators. So these are some of the questions that I want you to reflect upon, questions that I want you to think about as you take this class. In this class, you will learn essentially three very important tools, I think, for understanding where the world is going and for taking action. The first is I'm going to show you how to use certain concepts and tools to analyze the extent to which the world is changing. Secondly, by taking this class, you will learn about the direction and the intensity of some of these global trends. And then lastly, I want you to go over in this class and grasp to what extent companies and entire societies are at risk as a result of some of these global trends. Now, how do you take this class? It's a very simple process. So number one is before you watch the videos for each week of class, you should take an opinion survey that I have put together. And I will post the results within 24 hours of the deadline for completing it. Number two is you watch the mini lectures for each week. Number three is, of course, as you watch the lectures, try to answer the discussion questions that I will be posting on the PowerPoints. Number four is make sure that you have located those PowerPoints and you can follow them as you watch the lectures. Number five, is do the readings for the class. It's only one or at most two very short readings that we will make available for you on the website. Number six, at the end of each week of class, please take the quiz. We will tell you, of course, in real time which questions you are getting right and which you're getting wrong. And then finally, number seven, participate in the discussion forums and social media that we will make available as part of this class. Now, before we get any further, I'd like to share with you some thoughts about where the world is now and what are some of the manifestations of globalization. So, of course, when you think about globalization, I think most people think about ways in which cross-border activity that takes place between countries in the world has increased over the last 10 years or 20 years or 100 years. Some people also think about some supranational organizations such as the United Nations or the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund, or they think about forums like the World Economic Forum. When people think about globalization, they also think about attempts at organizing countries into blocks or groupings such as the European Union or the North American Free Trade Agreement. But globalization is not only about economic or financial issues, it's also about, more broadly, the spread of ideas and practices around the world. And I would like to also persuade you as part of this class that globalization is about awareness. That is to say, we are today so much more aware as to what's going on in different parts of the world than we were 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 50 years ago. And this surely has an impact on us, on the decisions that we make. This surely has an impact on the decisions that companies make. And this surely has consequences and implications for what's going on in the world more broadly. Now, I just mentioned that a lot of people equate the global economy with globalization. And it is true that the global economy, as we experience it today, is a very important component of globalization. And it will be a very important aspect or topic that we will cover in this class. So when I think about the global economy, I think about increasing flows of labor, money, goods, services, and information that are just moving around the world. Think about the global economy not just as countries relating to one another, but rather what's going on in different countries penetrating each other. Okay? I like a definition that was proposed by Manuel Castells. And he said, quote, "The global economy is an economy with the capacity to work as a unit in real time on a planetary scale," unquote. And you see, every single word in that definition is very, very important. What's different about the global economy today compared to other periods in history is that we see that the global economy is coordinated in real time, and that it has come to affect everything around the globe, not just in one particular part of the globe. So it is very different from the kind of, let me call it, international economy that we had in the 19th century, let's say 100 years ago or 150 years ago. It's also very different from the kind of global economy that was created in the wake of the discovery of the Americas in the 16th century. I strongly believe that in its present form, the global economy, this coordinated global economy, is something that is very recent, that really started to come into being in the 1980s, so about 25, 30, maybe 35 years ago at most. Now, why is the global economy so fascinating? You see, I started telling you that we're going to take a look in this class at the effects of globalization and global trends on a variety of topics, not just business topics or economic topics, but also politics, also people, societies, and so on and so forth. What I think is truly fascinating about the global economy and what's going on in the world right now is that we see a clash, we see a conflict between two very powerful ideas. Idea number one is the idea that the market should be left to its free unfolding. That is to say, the liberalism of the market. If you remember, there was a British economist, Adam Smith, who more than 200 years ago, in 1776, wrote a very important book, and he wrote in that book, quote, "The division of labor is limited by the extent of the market," unquote. And what he meant was that the larger the market, the more possibilities there are for specialization and for the division of labor. And therefore, the market will deliver better results to the extent that you remove boundaries. That's the liberalism of the market. Now, the second idea, which is, I believe, in conflict with the liberalism of the market, is the liberalism of citizenship. That is to say that we human beings in the modern world, most of us at least, have a country. We were born in some particular place and we're citizens of a particular country. That country gives us rights and obligations, and it protects us. So in other words, the liberalism of citizenship is something that seeks to establish boundaries. Who is a citizen, who is not a citizen? And in so doing, it's actually something that stands in contrast with the liberalism of the market, right? So one definition of what citizenship is, and I quote, "relationship between an individual and a state with associated individual rights and obligations." So in this class, we're going to see many instances of conflict between the logic of the market and the logic of citizenship. Sometimes citizens of one country feel that they're not getting what they should be getting out of global economic exchange. They feel that maybe there are more downsides than benefits to their participation in the global economy. Those are some of the issues that we're going to be discussing in this class. Let me show you a photograph that I think captures extremely well what I'm talking about, which is the one that you can see here, which was taken at a recent demonstration against one of these global meetings of economic and financial leaders in the world. And underneath it is a quote, which I'm going to read, which says, "Join the international anti-globalization movement," unquote. And I took this quote from the website of a grassroots organization that is opposed to economic and financial globalization. And if you think about what the quote is saying, it's obviously a slogan, but it's a very peculiar slogan because on the one hand, it says that it is against globalization, but at the same time, it is essentially saying that, well, join the international or the global struggle against globalization, which of course at some level at least, will also contribute to globalization itself. So these are the kinds of paradoxes, the kinds of problems that I would like you to think about as you take this class.